Welcome to the chase. You know, we're all running this race. We're all trying to claim victory in it. Think about it like this. All the while you're chasing after something that's good, God's chasing you with something great. Well, hello, I'm Chris McAlpin with The Chase. And I hope that wherever you're going, whatever you're doing, that you're doing something cool, that you're building something great, that you're leaning in, that you're pushing hard. Or maybe you just need a rest. You need to catch your breath. And that's okay too. Know that we're here to help you. We want you to win. This show's about making money. And it's about investing. And investing in ways that doesn't hurt people and doesn't hurt the environment. It's also about the chase. That all-consuming drive that we all have for something good. The passion, the pursuit to win, to build, to be creative. But you must know that, all while you're chasing something good. The God Almighty, who loves you, is chasing you with something great. It's God who gives you that passion, that drive, that desire to win. He's the ultimate winner, and He's chasing you with something awesome. And I know, when somebody says something like that, you hear a red flag. They start popping up all over the place. But please listen, we're here to educate. We're here to help people. We want to change lives. This is certainly not a ploy to use the Bible to sell people on becoming our clients. We look at the investment world through the lens of the Bible, which in our opinion, and I think I can make a very good argument for this, is the source of all truth. I'm an investment advisor. Our firm does financial planning, and we manage our clients' investment money for a fee. This is how we make a living. And we and our clients own some of the positions and use some of the methods that we discuss on this show. We're not giving personal investment advice. We can't do that on a podcast because we don't know you. And we don't know your personal goals, your needs, your financial situation. In fact, you shouldn't take any financial advice from a podcast. Education, sure, but not advice. I believe that you should seek investment advice on the securities and the strategies in regards that we discuss on this show to see how they best fit you. Hey, we'd be happy to do that. We want to get to know you. But this show is for educational purposes only. The show's content is our opinion, and it's not an invitation to buy or sell any of these investments. We want to teach you what we've learned through experience, trial, error, gains, losses, and yes, losses. It's not always a popular idea, but losses are a part of life, just like risk. Last but not least, we're not perfect. We're not guaranteeing you positive returns. Past returns, research data, index history, all of those tools that we may use on this show, they don't guarantee future results. Sorry, I can't guarantee the future. That's the Almighty's territory. But we're going to look at God's truths about money, and we're going to look at some excellent ideas. I'm glad you've joined us today, so welcome. Let's get on with the show.
But God Ministries shares the love of Jesus Christ through building sustainable communities around the world. They're currently building 3 sustainable communities. The 2 Haitian communities are in Galles-Cambon and Toman, both east of Port-au-Prince, near the border of the Dominican Republic. The community in the Mississippi Delta is in Jonestown, which is located near Clarksdale. But God Ministries operates to build sustainable communities which provide spiritual and physical guidance, water, education, food and housing, as well as economic development, creating dozens of jobs. Learn more by going to butgodministries.com.
Well, hello, this is Chris McAlpin with The Chase. I'm glad you joined us today. And I say us because I have my best buddy, Joel Holden, as my new co-host, or at least for day one, and we're going to see if this continues. See, I love having Joel with me because not only is he my best buddy, he's my business partner, but he's one of the 2 people in the world that loves to tell me what to do and prove how right he is all the time. For anybody that's counting, there are 2. The other one's my wife, Christy. She loves to tell me what to do too, and she is usually right. So I'm glad Joel is joining us. Hey, my friend, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. What are we going to talk about today?
Well, I want to recap first. So the past...
Well, of course you do. You like to recap and level set.
We got to make sure everybody's on the same page.
Okay, let's get everybody on the same page for us.
So here we go. Let's go all the way back to the beginning of the chase, right? What initially started this process of we are chasing good while God is chasing us with great, right? And what that looks like. And the past few weeks especially, you have gone down a road of a little bit more, how do we actually apply some of these things in our life? So we laid the biblical foundation and the case for the chase, so to speak. We've talked about ETF investing and stock trading, and we've talked about different market sectors that you can go into as well. Today, I thought it would be good, because you know me, I like practical, right? I'll buy in, but now you got to tell me what to do with it. And we can't tell everybody what to do with it, but we can tell you and talk about some things of why it is important. And in that vein,
are you gonna let me tell you what to do?
No, that's not how our relationship works.
Okay. All right.
Right.
But I like to tell you what to do. It's more fun.
You do. And if it makes you feel better, you can tell me. I just can't promise that I'm going to do it.
Okay, fair enough.
But in that vein, I thought it would be good if we talked a little bit about ESG investing. Mm-hmm. More specifically, Christian ESG investing. Sure. So first, let's start with this concept of ESG. What is it? What does it stand for? What does it look like?
ESG investing, it stands for environmental, social, governance investing. And it's kind of a mouthful. It ended up being this weird title. It's like it's, kind of crammed everything that the world thinks is good into one title. And it grew out of socially responsible investing. So the idea behind it is to invest in companies that do not harm people or do not harm the environment and by a set of standards. And those set of standards are very much up for debate. And so the sector has grown tremendously. So between 2019 and 2020, the amount of money that flowed into ESG investments doubled. And I think it grows out of people's desire to do good with their money, that's healthy. That's a good thing. It's a good wiring that God put inside of us, that we don't want our money to harm people. We don't want our money to harm the environment.
It's safe to say it's an easy way to get involved, right? You hear on the news all the problems in the world. For most people, they view it as, oh, well, if I can go, I can't solve, world hunger, but if I can go invest in a company that is doing good things or at least not causing harm, that's my small drop in the bucket to help.
Yes, I think.
Or global warming or whatever the case may be.
Yes, I'm going to bite on that in a minute and probably go a little cherry bomb in the middle of our conversation.
Of course you are.
But I think for the most part, people dive into ESG investing for a number of reasons. One, it is out of a genuine good heart that I don't want to do any harm. Okay. And they don't want to harm something that is important to them. Okay. Then I think that it is in some way people are, it's maybe just a token move of, oh, now that I know about it, I feel guilty if I don't. Okay. And then I think it's maybe the third set of people, maybe they're bartering with karma a little bit. They're negotiating with maybe if I do good, I will get a greater return. And okay, sure. I think that one, honestly, I think there's a lot of that going on. I think there's a lot of that going on with Christian ESG investing. They're trying to negotiate with God.
Okay, so let's talk about that then. So we've laid this foundation of, in general, so you've got this secular, for lack of a better word, version of ESG investing. So green, good labor practices, green companies, meaning they're either doing positive things to benefit the environment or at a minimum not harming the environment, right? Okay. Fair labor practices, the list could go on and on.
And I think it ought to be fair. Let's go on and say that there is a lot of lipstick on a pig that you and I know about because we study this.
Right.
There was an article recently quoting the former chief of socially responsible investing for BlackRock. Fancy, I believe is his last name. And that he basically said there's a lot of good people in this space, in the investment world. Their hands are just tied to the bottom line. And so you and I know this about our industry. You give Wall Street this latest, greatest toy that people are going to buy, they're going to slap a new label on it.
Sure.
And since this is it makes me think of, remember Tommy Boy?
Yes.
You can do something in a box and I can slap a guarantee on it and then still, but it's the,
Yes.
and since this is a family friendly show, I cannot quote it just like he quoted it.
No, you can't.
I could quote it that way. I do remember that line.
Please don't.
Best,
even if you did, it would probably get edited out.
It's one of the greatest salesman's lines of any movie, anywhere. It's an awesome line. But I think you got a lot of that in ESG investing, Joel. I think there's a lot of slap an ESG label on it. It's an old package of investments. Maybe take a few of the worst offenders out and slap a new label on it and call it ESG. I remember, gosh, this was 7 or 8 years ago. You and I looked at a Christian, biblically responsible fund that had the S&P 500's holdings, and they had only taken 5 companies out.
Right.
I mean, come on.
Right.
So you're telling me of the S&P 500, 495 of them are biblically responsible, and you're going to slap a biblically responsible label on it? No way. And when you and I looked under the hood, we were like, no. We stopped looking at that point. You might not even looked at it. I might have looked at it, looked under the hood, and never showed it to you.
I don't think I did, but it doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the biblically responsible side of it. Let's take this and move it from ESG
Am I supposed to distill
Christian ESG. What's the difference between the two? No cherry bombs yet.
Okay.
What's the difference between ESG and Christian ESG?
Okay, so ESG investing is biblically responsible.
Whatever the case,
so go back to there is no standard of ESG investing. There is no standard of truth on common variety ESG investing. There's a lot of companies out there that are trying to formulate a standard, and are they trying to formulate a standard out of heart of good, or are they trying to formulate a standard from a marketing mindset? I don't know. I'm not going to try to judge their heart or their mind there, but there's no common standard of ESG investing.
I think we could break it down. The two that I have seen that are the most common are do good versus do no harm.
Yes.
And even in that, it is a little problematic.
It is problematic because how do you measure do good?
Right.
I mean, we ought to talk about impact investing before we get done, but there's no measure of do good unless you're getting into impact investing, which if you're talking about public securities, there is a set of responsibility to the shareholders on public securities, right?
And by public securities, you mean stocks,
bonds,
things that you can find openly, publicly traded.
Right. Public markets, secondary markets that are open to the public, or the people, right? Am I running out of words here? All right. So if you have a broad set of standards for ESG investing, a biblical set of standards starts to narrow it, and it gives us a standard to say, God is God. Love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. So God and people are made in God's image. So do not harm people. Okay. But we're also stewards of the environment. So do not harm the environment. Okay. So we now have a set of truth. We have a standard of truth that God has laid out in his word and said, okay, this is a standard that we can do business by. So it starts to narrow what our set of standards are. So it starts to narrow our set of standards.
What you basically just said was one of the key differences between ESG and Christian ESG is the definition of it, right?
Absolutely.
We have a biblical standard that we can build off of for Christian ESG, whereas in ESG, it's still trying to be defined.
Mm-hmm. Yes, right? Yes. And so when you've got to keep this in mind, because just like, so we get to a biblical standard, we have many disagreements on what that biblical standard is.
Why?
I can't imagine why. why? It's like, why do the Catholics and the Baptists and the Presbyterians and the Methodists agree? We can't agree on baptism, man. I mean, do we take a shower or do we take a bath? I mean, we can't agree on that. I mean, so why? I love you. That's great, deadpan. Why? All right, there we go. All right,
I couldn't help myself.
You couldn't help. That's right. So first off, you got to buy. The Bible was written 2,000 years ago. It was wrapped up 2,000, so between 2,000 and 3,400 years ago, and it was written in an agrarian society. So it was not written with today's technology, today's markets, today's public equities and debt. Stocks and bonds. But it does not. That does not mean that its standards cannot apply today. And so, this is when you get very important. What does the Bible teach us about our assets? That is enormously important. What is our attitude? What is our purpose? How do we treat what we own? Who actually owns it? Who does the Bible say actually own what we think we own? And it starts to shape our opinion. Now, if we just stay with ESG investing at the moment, we got to recognize that there are disagreements in the standards, and that's okay. We should hold these lightly, okay? You've heard me say this before, that the Catholics will buy all the beer companies that you want to buy, but the Baptists would not buy beer at all, anywhere, under any circumstances, unless they're wearing a mask, right? Which in the last year they've gotten to. But our Catholic friends...
That does make it easier.
It does make it easier.
Two-county line rule doesn't apply.
Two-county line rule doesn't apply on that anymore. You can actually go in the liquor store and speak to your Baptist friend. But then our Catholic friends don't want to buy any of the firearms companies, right? And I'm making a joke. That's not. Well, actually, in some cases that might be broadly true. But by denomination, you have denomination Christian ESG investment funds that are out there. And they are based on denominational standards. Okay. And I think that's okay. I may not personally agree with those standards, or the investor may not agree with 100% of those standards, but you're starting to get to a more narrow space where you can agree with them. And at the end result, you'll find that unless you build the investment yourself, you're not going to 100% agree with the standards. And I think you and I found that even when you try to build it yourself, it might be so expensive for you to 100% agree with the standard that it's cost prohibitive as an investment.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
Because you're diving into, a lot of people think that with today's technology, you can wave a magic wand and discover everything about a company that you want to know. And that's just simply not true. And it's certainly not true to find it at a broad set that you're going to hold a broadly diverse investment fund with 100, 500,000 companies in that fund that you have analyzed from the top line to the bottom line, everything about the company.
Right.
You're just getting into a space that's impossible to know everything about it. So
let me stop you there, and I'm going to come back to that and pick up on it in a minute, because you're on the verge of touching on something I think is really important for us to get into. But before we go down that road, we talked a little bit about what some of the hallmarks are of ESG. Summarize the things that would get excluded on the Christian ESG side. So basically, in all of this, we're taking the entire universe of things that could be invested in, whether it's mutual funds or individual companies or ETFs or whatever the case may be, right? And we're saying if it doesn't meet a certain set of criteria, that it no longer qualifies. What is that criteria? I'm not going to say generally, that we use for our biblically responsible strategy.
I can go general, and then I'll add in what we use. So generally, it is going to exclude companies that earn revenue from the production or distribution of pornography.
Okay.
It earns exclude companies that earn revenue from the production or distribution of anything that touches abortion.
Okay.
typically excludes companies that deal in adverse labor relation practices. This is everything from abusive union practices to sweatshops. Okay. And those three really get into do not harm people.
Sure.
That's where they're driving it. So it's heavily excluded anything that touches any type of human trafficking, whether it's for sexual purposes or whether it's for labor purposes. Anything that touches the physical harm of humans. So not only is it abortion, so they're very pro-life, but also any company that has something to do with terrorist organizations, their products are used in terrorism, or they work with governments that support terrorism. And you're getting into, then some of the investments start getting into the environmental funds. And unfortunately, actually, Joel, this is where this gets political. Mm-hmm. So you have investments that lean on the conservative end of the spectrum, and you have investments that lean on the liberal end of the political spectrum. And the Bible is actually both. Mm-hmm. Okay, I know that shocks a lot of our friends here in the Bible Belt South, but the Bible it's very pro-environment. All right. So if you're wanting something that is very biblically sound, it needs to have an environmental screening sleeve to it. So those are the standards that you could get today that are inarguably biblical. Okay. Now you get into excluding companies that deal in gambling, alcohol, or tobacco because of the addictive nature of them, or deal in some types of drugs that are used in an addictive sort of way. Okay, but that gets hard. Now you're starting to get into space that gets very difficult to determine what's what.
Right.
Okay, but basically, do no harm to people and do no harm to the environment.
Okay, it can be summarized under
like that
under those categories. Okay, so now that we've laid this foundation of what those standards are, I want to go back to what you were talking about just a minute ago, and that's the application of them.
Yeah.
If you're talking to someone about this, what would you tell them to be careful of and to be mindful of? And I'm leading you to a question, and if you don't answer it, I'm just going to ask it again. You know exactly what it is.
Yeah,
so
I'm just going to say, why don't you just ask your question? How I lead somebody in this conversation is, we walk through the conversation of what do you want to profit from? What do you want to earn revenue from? Because at the end of the day, you're making an investment to earn a profit.
Sure.
And where are you comfortable earning that profit from? Are you comfortable? Because we get this conversation a lot about technology companies. Okay, why is this particular company not in your stock sleeve?
Sure.
Well, it doesn't make it through our biblically responsible screening. Why not? Because they distribute pornography.
Right.
And there's some major technology companies out there that you take a step back and you realize they're possibly the #1 distributor of pornography in the world.
Yep.
You go, wow, I'd like to have that stock, but wow, do I want to profit from that? Okay.
Right.
And I know a lot of times people then ask me, did they mean to? Well, they did not mean to. You know, I'm not on that board. Right. I'm not CEO of that company. You know, and so what do you want to make money from? And I've heard people say, "Hey, Chris, I don't really care." Okay, it's your money, all right. But do you really not care? I mean, seriously, do you really not care what you make money from? At the end of the day, do you really want to earn money from a company that kills babies? That's harsh to put it that way, but now we can debate where you believe life begins. But if you believe it begins in the womb, do you want to earn money from a drug that kills babies?
Sure.
That's rough.
I think,
but that's true.
I think most of the time, if you phrase the question, what do you want to earn money from? Most people would say, and I was like, you and I talked about this. I was like this for a long time. I don't really care. And then you pointed that question out, or maybe not that specific one, but one similar to it. And I was like, well, yeah, now I care. And I think really,
I've never actually been. very few clients have I ever said that to. I've said it to you. I've said it to a few good friends.
Sure. But really what you're asking is the heart of the question. And so you kind of start at this point with the assumption that they buy in and they want to go down this road, right? But even before you get to that point, and there's somebody may be sitting here going, well, why does it matter? When you ask a pointed question like that, I think, I'm not going to speak for everybody, but there are people out there that would emphatically say, no, I do not want to profit from that. Mm-hmm. But let's talk to honestly where I was when you and I first had this conversation, right? Mm-hmm. And some of the things that you've got to be careful with when you're going through this process and making these decisions of, okay, I'm going to shift my investments to match up with my belief system. And that's really what we're talking about, is our belief system. And our beliefs oftentimes get muddied up with our religion and whatever denomination we are. What are our core beliefs about the Bible, about Scripture, about who God is, right? I think one of the things, especially it has become more obvious to me of late, is how this could actually become dangerous for a believer from a legalistic standpoint.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
Oh, gosh. I'm going to rail on that in a minute, too. So, yeah.
So, well, go ahead and rail on it now.
All right. Well, I think that the first thing to think about when I make the statement of, do you want to profit from abortion?
Sure.
Right. That everyone goes through I shouldn't say everyone. Most people go through a slower process with this. I went through a very slow process of coming to the conclusion of why this is important. Very slow. And some of it had to do with my background in investments, what I'd been trained that my job was to make my clients money, period, the end. Okay, I believe our job is very different than that. That is not our only job. If that's our only job, Jay, why would we even do financial planning? Why won't we just sling stocks like we used to and pedal on the floor and make as much money as we can? Right. It's not our job. Our job is financial planning. Our job is risk management. Our job is counseling. Our job is a lot of things. That's not just make clients money.
I'll never forget, we had a wholesaler. They represent some large mutual fund companies. For those of you who are familiar with pharmaceuticals, it's similar to a drug rep. They would come in and they try to get us to use their products. And the guy, I'll never forget him. I'm not going to say his name. You know exactly what I'm talking about. But he came in and he was previously an advisor. And one of the things that he said, I'll never forget this, and it was the first time it ever occurred to me, about the types of conversations we have with our clients. And how true that statement is that you just made. But he said, I got tired of being a therapist. That's how he felt about it. Mm-hmm. So he stopped being an advisor that worked with individuals and worked only with advisors. But I mean, to your point, I have probably had more conversations about the depth of the financial decisions and what they mean on a personal and an emotional level, and for the family, mm-hmm. and whether it's sickness or retirement or death or whatever the case may be, than I have about make me as much money as you can. And we've had plenty of those conversations too. But I'm off on a tangent. Just simply to say, a lot of times, I think we view our money as something that is very detached from us and who we are, yet we wrap up so much of our identity. It's almost this idea of it is going to be the scoreboard for my life to determine my success, whether it's job, account balances, house, toys, whatever the case may be, but it's not connected to who I am. And that's a lie.
That's a lie. That our society teaches us that this is our identity. And this is the whole tagline of a chase, that chasing security, chasing success, or chasing status. And this is not a blanket accurate statement 100% of the time, but by and large, men define their identity by their level of success. Ladies want security, and all of us want status. And I've done this for nearly 20 years. I've seen that with my own eyes for nearly 20 years. I've read a pile of books that support the ideas. And this is one of the basic premise of the entire show that we're doing with the chase. This is why our fears, the fear of missing out, the fear of loss, the fear of running out. This is why our biases of overconfidence or reliability biases, this is why they seep into our financial decisions, because we are tying up who we are with our money. And it is dangerous. It's why God wrote 2,300 verses approximately in the Bible, speaking to us, teaching us about our money, because he knew we were going to set it on the throne of our lives. So going back to my statement earlier of, now the Bible was written in an agrarian society, but it is 100% applicable today because God wrote it to be, or he spoke through men to have that word written so that it is applicable today. So anytime that somebody wants to just detach themselves from their money and say, just make me as much money as you can, I don't care how you do it, they're lying to themselves. Okay. And they're headed to a disaster. Now, the big challenge is that a lot of people just don't know that they're lying to themselves. Mm-hmm. And so when we point it out as financial advisors, they get pissed. they get their panties in a wad and they want to go to another advisor. Now, I've done this long enough that I don't really care. Okay.
You care about the person.
Oh, I care about the person 100%. And it's because we care about the person that we tend to not put up with that conversation very well. And I love our clients. I mean, why else would we do a show on this topic if we didn't love people? Right. I mean, this is a ministry. This is for free. You and I know this. We're spending money. We're not making any money doing this. You know what I mean?
Right.
But it's because we care about people. I remember years ago when our oldest daughter was real little, and she had a serious breathing issue. And we had rushed to the doctor. My wife called me. I rushed out of the office. I mean, she's like 6 months old. We're new parents. We don't know what we're doing. And we were taking Kate to the hospital from the doctor. And the doctor stopped us at just the right moment and said, hey, can I pray with you? And it was so impactful. He didn't stop and share the gospel. He didn't walk down the Roman road with us. He didn't quote John 3:16. He just said, hey, can I pray? And it was he didn't know us. He didn't know our heart. He didn't know where we went to church. He didn't know if we, were Christian and Easter churchgoers or none at all, or every Sunday and every time the doors. He didn't know. He didn't know us yet. Now we know him very good now. 3 kids have gone to visit him since. I know this doctor very well now. But I remember that night in the hospital. I can't sleep. Yeah, I'm worried about my daughter, but it had one of those little tiny hospital beds that wasn't a bed at all. So I'm not sleeping.
And you're not exactly tiny.
No, I guess not. I couldn't fit in that chair anyway. And I remember thinking, wow, that was so cool. I'd love to be a doctor so that I could pray with my clients. And it was like God started laughing at me. It's like, seriously? It's like, how many clients have you sat down? And I was a young advisor. Then I had not had these experiences, but how many times have you sat down and somebody's lost their spouse, somebody has a wayward child, somebody is diagnosed with cancer? And Joel, you know this. This is when financial planning goes to us praying together. It just talked about, I need to get $30,000 out of my account to pay for medical expenses. And sometimes they're great stories too. There's just as many good stories. I'm taking $30,000 out to pay for a wedding. So let's pray for the family. So because our money touches us so deeply in our heart, which we can get into why in a minute, it is something that we need to guard against it sitting on the throne of our heart. And that is where it gets insidious. And it can do it to a believer that goes to church every Sunday just as fast as it can do to someone who's never darkened the doors of a church because of the way society has trained us. Society has trained us to find success and satisfaction in our stuff. It's why we so often pray to God for stuff. We go to God and we don't want God, we want what he can give us. And so to wrap this back to Christian ESG, and I said earlier, it's as if a lot of people are bargaining with karma, or Christians are bargaining with God. They have this feeling that if I invest in something that is biblically responsible, I'm going to get a greater return. And there is no data whatsoever that supports it. And you and I know because you and I have looked for it. Okay, we've done our own testing to see, does the biblically responsible, does the ESG actually return give a greater return? And you'll see some stats out there. that seem to demonstrate that it does, but when you really look under the hood, it's just in seasons.
Sure.
Because there's times that people buy a truckload of alcohol. Over the last 12 months, when churches were shut down but liquor stores were open, people bought a truckload.
Essential services.
Essential services. And our Catholic friends were very happy about that too, you know.
Some of our Baptist
friends do, but they won't admit it. You know? By the way, y'all know that Joel and I are deacons and Sunday school teachers at the Baptist church. So we are making fun of ourselves when we say that.
We are. Right,
I think we're probably off track at this point.
We are.
We'll stay off track. That's fine. Or you can get us back on. Okay.
We're running out of time a little bit. So I want to wrap all of this up for our listeners. And to me, one of the best ways to do that is for you to just share briefly your story of you mentioned earlier it was a long process, but what was that final piece that pushed you over the line to where you had to get off the fence and say, I no longer have an option but to do this? And by doing this, I want to preface that statement. It didn't mean that you came to this point and immediately changed everything, but what immediately changed was we now must do something. So we're going to research and responsibly go down this road. So what was the point that, quote unquote, got you off the fence or pushed you over the side?
And I think part of what you just said is a really good point. We have a microwave society. God does not have a microwave mind. You know, we think that when we see something, we change overnight. And the older we get, we recognize that most things of value don't change overnight. Your attitude can change, but your action might take a while.
Sure.
Okay. So in my case, I grew up in the school of thought that was pretty common in the evangelical churches or the more conservative churches, that there's no reason to attempt to invest biblically responsibly because you can't do it. You just could not research the companies well enough. The common investor couldn't research the companies well enough to do it. And that was very true in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Now, there are some companies out there that really started breaking that mold in the 90s. And for the last 20 years, they were kind of trendsetters in that. But for me, I read a book by Gary Moore, Faithful Finances 101. And in it, he pointed out Exodus 21. Which I know that this is everybody's favorite passage, and probably most people have that chapter memorized. Absolutely. Exodus 21. Absolutely. I mean, no doubt. John 3:16, Exodus 21. I mean, right, it's right there together, right? No, probably everybody's like, I didn't even know if Exodus had 21 chapters. but in this passage,
we're not going to do a Bible drill test.
We're not going to do a Bible drill test. Okay, so in this passage, this is where it points out that if a bull gets out of a pen and it gores a person, you kill the bull. And this was somebody's asset. I mean, think of a tractor that reproduces. This was a valuable farming machine that God is so serious about our assets that if your bull gets out of his pen and he kills someone, you kill the bull. You don't eat the bull, you burn him up, and he's gone. You destroy that asset totally. You get no benefit from it, period. That was a serious offense. But if the bull was known to act this way, and he does it, you not only kill the bull, you kill the owner. So God is so serious about, he was so serious about his people being righteous and acting holy, that if your asset harmed other people, your own life was in danger for it. And that stopped me. And I couldn't get that out of my mind, that God is so serious about how we manage our investments, that we're going to answer for this. And I think we're going to answer for our level of knowledge in this as well. And so I probably rocked on for a few years of how do we do this? And I got a chance to get to know Gary, and I remember talking with Gary about it and said, all right, how? Tell me how. Can you trust these types of screens? And so you can screen stocks, you can screen bonds, you can screen mutual funds and ETFs, and you can go, there are companies that screen this data to see what's in them And you got to research the reliability of that data. And I'm sure the first time I came to you and I brought it up, I know what you normally do. You ignored me the first time. And I brought it up the second time, and you started to go, maybe I'll pay attention. And I probably brought it the third time, so dang it, Joel, we're going to do this, and I pay attention. All right, but the knock on it, this was 10 or 15 years ago, so I wasn't doing that to you yet. The knock on it then was, okay, you have a biblically responsible investment, but the returns stink. All right, so I struggled with that for a few years, and I was like, okay, my job is to make good money for our clients. Now, I can't have crappy returns, but slap a Christian label on them and call it good. That doesn't honor God. And as I got to studying, it just got to a point where it was unacceptable to me. I couldn't fathom that we could not have a strong, biblically responsible investment portfolio that made good returns. It just was unacceptable to not find the right combination that we could screen the positions in the portfolio and make a good return. Because quite frankly, a biblically responsible label on something that has crappy returns, that doesn't honor God at all. I mean, he made the sun, the moon, the stars. He made the earth, waterfalls, mountains, the ocean. I mean, he makes really cool stuff. Sure. He expects us to do good work. And so the same thing was true in diving into these investments. It was unacceptable to have subpar returns and slap a Christian label on it. It's also unacceptable to not go down the road as far as we could to screen the positions in the portfolios. All right, and so kind of that combination that there's a point, you and I discovered that there's a point that, okay, this is as far as we can go, or this investment is cost prohibitive. Hence, it's no longer an investment.
Sure.
Okay, so if you're going to get out of the investment space and into the cost prohibitive space, and you're going to call it a ministry, then do something that's more valuable than just going diving into investments. Go into impact investing, and the public markets aren't the best place to do that. Okay, right. So you start getting into these combinations of complexities that it's unacceptable to not dive into the complexities and learn for you and me. Right. Okay, now this is why people hire us. Sure. Right, and so. It was unacceptable, but it was also, God gives you common sense and wisdom that you start holding some of those rules lightly. Okay, so can I say that our 100% biblically responsible full portfolio is 100% biblically responsible? No, it's not. It is to the best of our ability, but I know that people run those companies, hence those companies are sinful, just like Sound Financial.
Sure.
Right? Just like the guys that run Sound Financial, we're simple too. We're broken. Yeah, right? So we don't do everything perfect. So we're not about to slap a perfection label on these portfolios. They're not perfect in any shape, form, or fashion. Right? And so there gets into a line in there that it's the best I got, Lord. It's all I've got. And if please make it better, please make it work, but you got my best effort. And it genuinely is your best effort.
You know, while you were talking, I'm thinking about Exodus 21 and the seriousness of our assets, but I can't help but think about the parable of the talents as well. And it's, Jesus could have told that story with just two guys.
Yeah.
But he included that middle one as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a lot of times he gets overlooked. But I think there's a point in there that says, I expect you to steward what I give you to the best of your ability, which is exactly what you were just saying. Yeah. Whatever that ability is, because I've given you the ability. I've given whatever your ability is, I, the Lord, have given to you.
Right, right.
So when you put those two things together, to me, if I had to boil it down to two buckets, it is take your assets seriously, Exodus 21, and steward them to the best of your ability, which is the parable of the talents. One more thing I want to point out that's a little bit off topic, but as we're wrapping up today, you made a statement, and I think you probably glossed over it just as fast as you made the statement, but to me, I'm still sitting here thinking about it probably 10 minutes later. Mm-hmm. But this statement of we go to God for what we want and what He can give us, and not who He is. So, as we end today, let me just say, I encourage you to spend some time in prayer, thinking about your assets and how you are stewarding them. But also, first, go to God for who He is and not just what He can provide for you. Thank y'all for listening. We look forward to seeing y'all next time.
Investment advisory services offered through Sound Financial Strategies Group, LLC, a registered investment advisor. Certain representatives of Sound Financial are also registered representatives offering securities through APW Capital, Inc., member FINRA, SIPC, at 100 Enterprise Drive, Suite 504, Rockaway, New Jersey, 07866, at 1-800-637-3211. Sound Financial and APW Capital are separate and unrelated companies.
Impact investing, environmental, social, and governance, ESG investing, and faith-based investing will consider other factors beyond traditional financial information to select securities, which could result in investment performance deviating from other strategies or broad market benchmarks, depending on whether such sectors or investments are in or out of favor in the market. These strategies will also rely on certain value-based criteria to eliminate exposures found in similar strategies or broad market benchmarks, which could also result in investment performance deviating from that of more traditional investments.